The phone buzzed on my glass-topped desk, its vibration against the polished wood echoing like a tiny accusation. I glanced at the screen, and there it was. "No one's coming to your party. Grow up."
Mom.
3 words, more cutting than 1,000 arguments ever were. I sank into my leather chair, the cream silk blouse I'd carefully chosen this morning brushing against my skin, smooth and expensive, a reminder that I had built a life she might never understand. Outside the window, the city stretched endlessly, skyscrapers gleaming, traffic humming, a world moving fast while I felt suspended in that single, spiteful text. I could almost hear her voice, sharp and impatient, insisting I shouldn't expect anyone to care. And for a moment, I felt that familiar knot in my stomach, the one from my teenage years when rejection felt like an anchor. But this time, I let it sit there without letting it drag me down. The apartment smelled faintly of coffee, cinnamon lingering from the mug I'd abandoned half full on the counter. My reflection caught in the glass of the window, poised, composed, untouchable. Yet beneath the polished exterior, the hurt lingered, a reminder that some words could pierce even the strongest armor. I set the phone down and smiled, a quiet, deliberate curve of the lips. I wasn't going to let a text ruin the day.
Not today.
I remember the night clearly, though it feels like a lifetime ago. I was 19, standing in the narrow hallway of our small suburban house, my hands trembling as I clutched the letter I'd just received. College had accepted me on a full scholarship, my first real taste of independence, but my excitement was met with something else entirely. "Why are you even thinking about leaving now? You'll ruin everything," Mom had snapped, her eyes sharp with judgment. Dad stayed quiet, his shoulders stiff, and I could feel the weight of their disappointment pressing down like a heavy winter coat. The lump in my throat made it impossible to speak. I wanted to tell them I could manage, that I wasn't abandoning them. I was just trying to be me, but the words stuck, tangled in fear and defiance. The hallway light flickered, casting shadows that seemed to mock my hesitation. I felt small, dismissed, invisible. Then my grandmother's voice broke through the tension. She had slipped quietly into the room, her fingers brushing mine as she handed me a small, worn journal. "Write your own story, honey," she whispered. "Don't let anyone decide your life for you." The leather cover smelled faintly of vanilla and old paper, comforting in a way I had never experienced before. It was simple, unassuming, but it felt like a lifeline. That night, I sat on my bedroom floor, the journal open, pen in hand, and made a choice. I would leave, yes, but not out of rebellion. I would leave to create something of my own. Every tear, every harsh word, every silent disapproval had led me here. I scribbled my first plan, small but deliberate. Work hard, learn everything I could, become someone who could never be dismissed so easily again. By the time I closed the journal, I knew I was ready. I felt the fear still, yes, but it had transformed into a strange, thrilling certainty. I was stepping into a world where my value wouldn't be measured by their approval. That night, I became the architect of my own life, carrying with me the quiet, unwavering wisdom of my grandmother's words. Leaving home wasn't easy. The airport terminal smelled of coffee and sanitizer, a mix that somehow made everything feel more real. I clutched my small suitcase, the journal tucked under my arm like a secret talisman, and walked toward the gate that would take me away from the familiar chaos of judgment and expectation. I had no money, no network, and barely enough confidence to carry myself through a week, but I had determination, and that felt heavier than any burden I'd ever carried. The first months were brutal. I worked nights at a tiny boutique cafe downtown, balancing shifts with online classes. My fingers ached from typing and dishwashing alike, and more than once I cried into the mug of coffee I was supposed to be serving to someone else. But I kept the journal close, filling it with small victories, learning how to negotiate a contract, finishing a challenging project, or just surviving a day without breaking. It was during a networking event that I met Eleanor, a sharp, seasoned businesswoman who saw potential in me that I hadn't yet recognized myself. She had a way of asking questions that made me think bigger, work harder, and stop underestimating what I could achieve. "You're wasting your talent playing small," she told me once, her eyes steady and unwavering. I didn't argue. I didn't have the energy to argue with someone who believed in me so completely. Slowly, the pieces began to fall into place. My first big client was a small publishing firm willing to take a chance on an ambitious young woman who knew nothing but asked everything. I poured myself into every detail, staying up until the city lights dimmed and my apartment hummed with the quiet of accomplishment. Then came my first profitable sale, the first paycheck that wasn't just enough to survive but enough to feel alive, capable, independent. Through it all, I kept my progress hidden. Every phone call home was carefully measured, every social media post curated to reflect a modest, ordinary life. I didn't need approval. I didn't need validation. I needed results, and I was getting them, one calculated, deliberate step at a time. By the time I turned 25, I was running my own consulting firm, managing clients across states, building wealth quietly but steadily. My apartment reflected my hard-earned success. Art I'd chosen because it resonated with me, books that challenged and inspired me, furniture that reminded me of the taste I had cultivated for myself, not inherited from anyone else. Each detail was a silent testament to the life I had created from scratch, far from the dismissive words and doubts that had once held me captive. And every night, before I closed my eyes, I opened the worn journal from my grandmother, reading the words she had written long ago. "Write your own story, honey." I smiled, feeling the weight of her wisdom settle comfortably over my shoulders. I had done exactly that, and it had only just begun. The knock at my apartment door was almost gentle, almost polite, but it carried the weight of curiosity and expectation. I knew who it was before I even opened it. Mom, Dad, and my younger sister, faces full of that familiar mixture of skepticism and judgment. They had come expecting to see the same girl they had always underestimated, the one who cried easily, who faltered at every opportunity, who relied on them for everything. I opened the door wearing a simple black dress and a calm smile, the kind that could soothe or intimidate depending on the room. "Hi," I said, voice steady, light, deliberate. "Come in." Their eyes scanned the apartment instantly. It was my space now, every corner curated to reflect the person I had become. Expensive but tasteful art lined the walls, abstract pieces I had bought after studying under local artists. Bookshelves were stacked with volumes I had devoured, reflecting knowledge, curiosity, and a mind cultivated beyond what they had imagined. My desk, neat and elegant, held the latest tech, a polished laptop, and a small vase of fresh tulips that seemed to breathe life into the room. Everything spoke of independence, sophistication, and hard-earned accomplishment. I gestured for them to sit, feeling the old, familiar tension in the air. Mom's eyes narrowed slightly, Dad's jaw tightened, and my sister looked at me with a mixture of awe and confusion. "You've done all this?" Mom finally whispered, almost to herself. I smiled, letting the silence hang. "Yes," I said softly but firmly. "And there's more. I run my own consulting firm. My company has clients across 5 states. I own my apartment outright, my investments are growing, and my net worth is well into 7 figures." The words hit like a shockwave. Mom's hand trembled slightly as she touched the arm of the couch. Dad blinked rapidly, trying to process the information, his silence louder than any argument. My sister's mouth opened and closed, searching for a response. I leaned back, calm, observing their reactions, letting every second stretch. "I didn't tell you any of this," I continued, "because I didn't need validation. I didn't need your approval. I built this life for me, not for you." Mom's lips pressed into a thin line, her earlier scolding text flashing vividly in my mind. "No one's coming to your party, grow up." That had been her attempt to undermine me, to dismiss my efforts, to remind me of the girl they thought I was. And now, standing in the apartment she had once deemed unreachable, I realized how powerless her words had been against the life I had built. I reached for the journal on my coffee table, the leather cover familiar and comforting. This, I said, lifting it slightly, was my beginning. The advice inside kept me going when nothing else would. And I kept writing my own story. They sat in stunned silence, the room vibrating with disbelief and a faint trace of guilt. I let them absorb it, letting every glance, every pause, every flicker of recognition sink in. For once, they couldn't dismiss me, couldn't lecture me, couldn't belittle me. I was untouchable, not because of wealth or status, but because I had finally claimed my power, my voice, my life. And in that quiet, tension-filled moment, I realized that the party I had been planning, the one they thought no one would attend, wasn't theirs to judge anymore. It was mine to cancel, reshape, and reclaim on my terms. The moment I saw the surprise and disbelief in their eyes, I felt a quiet, steady surge of power. Not the kind that demands fear, but the kind that commands respect. For years, I had sought approval, measured myself by their expectations, and tolerated their judgments. Now, the tables had turned, and I could finally choose the terms of our relationship. Before we go any further, I said, my voice calm but unwavering, there are conditions. Not out of spite, but out of necessity for all of us. Mom's brow furrowed, and Dad leaned forward slightly, wary but curious. My sister's eyes shone with tentative hope. I took a deep breath, letting each word land deliberately. Mom, if we are to have a relationship moving forward, you must stop undermining me and your children. Words can wound, and I refuse to carry your criticism as truth anymore.
Support or silence.
Nothing in between. Mom's lips pressed together. I didn't flinch. Dad, I need honesty, not silent judgment. Stop pretending my choices are reckless, when they're deliberate. I need encouragement, or at least recognition of what I achieve without interference. I turned to my sister, softer now, the edge of mentorship in my tone. And you, little one, must stop comparing yourself to me or anyone else. Follow your own path, discover your own strengths. I will support you, but only if you respect yourself first. I paused, letting the weight of my words settle. We can rebuild our connections, but we do it with respect, boundaries, and integrity. Toxic habits, constant criticism, and outdated expectations have no place here. They never did. This is not punishment. It's protection for all of us. There was silence, heavy but different now. Not tension-filled like before, but reflective. I saw their faces shift slowly. Mom's defensive posture softened, Dad's eyes cleared, and my sister's small nod was full of courage. They understood, finally, that I wasn't threatening them.
I was offering them a chance to grow alongside me.
I reached for the journal again, tracing the leather spine with my fingers. This book guided me through doubt, fear, and loneliness, I said, voice firm but gentle. It reminds me that power doesn't come from wealth or status. It comes from knowing your worth, standing by it, and offering others the chance to rise with you if they choose. This is our chance to start fresh. I let them digest that, feeling the shift. The power balance wasn't just mine, it was mutual now. They had a choice: evolve, respect boundaries, and honor themselves, or remain spectators in a story they no longer controlled. Finally, I smiled, the warmth in my eyes deliberate and strong. I believe in all of us. But we step forward together only if everyone commits to respect, honesty, and growth. Everything else falls away. For the first time, I felt that calm, unshakable certainty that had driven me through years of struggle. I wasn't just claiming my life. I was offering a blueprint for theirs if they were ready to follow it. And this time, I held the map. Weeks passed, and the air between us changed. Conversations no longer carried the weight of judgment, but the warmth of cautious respect. Mom called occasionally, not to criticize but to ask questions about work or life, genuinely interested in hearing my perspective. Dad, once quiet and skeptical, offered advice when asked, careful not to impose it as law. Even my sister blossomed, taking small risks, pursuing her own passions, her confidence growing with each step. I often sat by my window in the evenings, the city lights spilling across the floor like spilled gold, reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. From that hurt-filled text, from the lonely nights of doubt, from the harsh words and dismissals, I had emerged not just successful, but unshakably grounded. My apartment, once a symbol of private achievement, had become a sanctuary of self-respect and growth, a place where the people who mattered most could witness and perhaps learn the power of resilience. The journal remained on my coffee table, its leather worn and pages filled with the hopes, fears, and strategies of a younger me. I opened it sometimes, running my fingers over the familiar words my grandmother had written. "Write your own story, honey." Those words had guided me through fear, through rejection, and into the quiet, steady confidence I now carried. I realized that power was not only in achievement, but in the grace and patience to allow others to grow alongside you, or choose their own path. One evening, I walked into my kitchen, coffee in hand, and glanced at my reflection in the window. I saw a woman who had endured doubt and judgment, yet emerged whole, composed, and proud. The hurt from a single text, the one that had set this entire journey into motion, felt distant now, almost laughable, like the shadow of a girl I once was. I smiled softly, lifting the journal as if to toast the memory of my grandmother. "We write our own stories," I whispered to myself, voice steady, filled with warmth and strength. "And we decide who gets to read them and on what terms." That night, I canceled the party I had once planned, not out of anger, but as a statement of choice, of control, of self-respect. I had grown beyond the need for validation, beyond the need to prove myself to anyone. The life I had built was mine alone, yet rich enough to inspire, to guide, and to empower. And as I settled into the quiet of my apartment, I finally understood the profound truth behind that simple, cutting text. Sometimes, the best way to teach someone to respect you is to first respect yourself. Bottom of form.